Hello, fellow horror fiends, and welcome to The Horror Within Me, a podcast dedicated to the world of horror. Join us each week as our host explores a new, horrifying topic from the many realms of horror, such as film, television, and more, and returns to tell us his terrifying revelations. So sit back, relax, and get ready to face the horrors within.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to a brand new Spooky Sunday episode of The Horror Within Me. I am your host, Eric, and we are officially in the month of September, which is officially spooky season in everyone's minds, and also, aside from spooky season, it's also back to school. And I thought, what better way to kick off the back to school month than with a throwback and a nod to the infamous after school specials of the 70s, 80s, and even 90s. Now, for those listeners who have no idea what the after-school specials were, they were a series of anthology movies or segments on, I believe, ABC that dealt with topics that kids would be interested in, but they would be able to experience and watch with their parents to, bring up uncomfortable things such as like divorce and things like that. So I thought, let's have fun and twist it up a little and do our own kind of after-school specials, but horror movie editions. And for this week's after-school special movie that we're going to touch on, it's actually not just a movie, but an entire film series, which we're going to do A Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger. But the focus is not going to be on the villain Freddy Krueger. The focus is going to be on the children and their parents in the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. But before we get into it, I want to do a brief what we're doing with the Horror Within Me recent recap kind of thing. So a few things to look forward to. I am going to be at a local harvest festival in October. Super exciting. We're going to be promoting the show and the Spooky Shakers. One of the things that we're going to be doing while we're at the festival is selling the Horror Within Me t-shirts that are going to have the logo and the tagline on the back that says, podcast dedicated to the world of horror. So for those of you who like to support the podcast or are fans of the podcast or both and are interested in doing a pre-order, we will be pre-ordering the shirts online as well in the next week or so. So if you are not already following me on social media, especially Facebook, where we post most of the news, definitely go over to Facebook and follow the Horror Within Me. There you will see the details soon, like I said, on how to pre-order a shirt and the form for that and pricing, which will be all coming soon. Another fun, super exciting thing that I'm so proud and excited to share with everyone as we get closer to October is in the beginning, the first episode of October is going to be an extra special episode of The Horror Within Me. It is the first ever interview with a celebrity from a horror movie. I don't want to reveal too much yet. Pay attention again onto the social media channels to see who the special guest is and when the episode is going to go live. And here's a little more detail. It's not only going to be streaming on where you get your podcast, it will also be the first ever video podcast episode of The Horror Within Me that is going to go streaming on the YouTube channel of The Horror Within Me the same day and time that the podcast is going to be streaming. So listen to it, and if you'd like, you can watch the interview also, which I'm so happy and proud of, and I really think I think it's an amazing guest and an amazing episode, and really gives some valuable input, not just into the movie that we discuss, but life in general as horror fans and things as such. So I'm very excited, and again, keep a close eye out. A lot of big things happening with the Horror Within Me. We have a photo shoot coming up too for the Spooky Shaker, so we'll be able to do, the pictures next to each of the current recipes and drinks that we have on the website. So so many things. I am so grateful to have wonderful, wonderful people in my life, and I'm just very happy. And so that is all the news for the horror within me. In other horror movie news, I think we got for Halloween Ends because we're getting closer and closer. So each week, I'll probably add a little bit of something else that I've read or seen. There was another photo release of what seems to be Michael Myers or the copycat killer, if there is a copycat killer, and a woman when in a really great photo. Looks like she's screaming and bloody and stabbed, and he's kind of there. It's an odd angle that they're standing in with the knife, so I'm not really sure like how they caught it or what was going on, but definitely a cool image. So if you haven't already, go check it out on Halloween movies or really anywhere you can get Halloween Ends. Somebody's talking about it, so I'm sure you might have already heard about it, but super exciting. But let's get into why we're here today. A Nightmare on Elm Street, God, was released in 1984. We all know the infamous Freddy Krueger, played by Robert Englund. The original is terrifying, and there's 7 movies, 6 in the film universe, and the 7th being a kind of quote unquote standalone where the actors are themselves and their characters within the universe of A Nightmare on Elm Street, which was super cool. But currently me and my husband are watching them all over again, and we've just finished A Nightmare on Elm Street for the Dream Master. And there's a recurring theme that I've noticed with the teenagers and their parents in A Nightmare on Elm Street series. So I want to dive into a few of those topics and really kind of unpack my observations on this because I find it very interesting, especially as a child myself at the time in a broken home with parents who were similar in ways to the parents that you see in the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. So personally, I can relate to a lot of things. I can definitely relate to the character of Alice, which we'll get to. But I want to start off with the OG original Nightmare on Elm Street with Nancy, her mother, her father. I had a conversation with my sister yesterday, talking to her about preparing for this episode and talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street and the parents and something that had stuck out to me, and I realized older, but I didn't realize it as a child when I would watch the movie, is Nancy's parents were not together. I knew that the mother was an alcoholic. I mean, they didn't shy. It was not something subtle. I don't know if they even shied away from the fact that the parents weren't together. I didn't, and I had said to her, I said to my sister, I said, I didn't know that they weren't together. And she said, really? I knew right the whole time. And it's just funny that things like that two experiences that she's older than me. So when she saw it, she had a different maturity to her brain. Maybe not much more than me, but a little bit more because we have a 4-year difference, that she caught on to the broken home faster than I did. See, our parents, my mother was an alcoholic and my father was verbally and physically abusive at times to both my mother and siblings of mine, more so my sister, who I'm speaking about now, than anyone else. But it's interesting that we've, can identify certain things within the horror community and within ourselves in these movies. So, like I said, I noticed more about the alcoholism in A Nightmare on Elm Street 1 than I did with them not being together. I just figured the dad was working all the time, maybe overnight or something, but he was never really in the house. And there's a scene, I think, where the mother and father are talking about getting her help, and I think that's when I kind of realized at some point that they weren't together. But you have this character, Nancy, who, for all intents and purposes, seems to be an amazing child, even within having this issues with her mother and the separation of her father. She's obviously very close with her dad. I'm not sure why she's still living with the mother. Maybe in those times, the kids always, they favor to stay with the mom. That's like the main home, the school district. Who knows? But the thing that I've noticed with the movies is, the kids are the children of the parents who committed this justice against Freddy, for lack of a better term. The justice system failed them. He was let loose on a technicality, so they took matters into their own hands and they torched and killed him, burned him alive, and got rid of the remains and hid them. And now the children are paying for their sins. And a correlation is, like my sister had pointed out to me, is that the parents and all have these issues, and I wonder if it correlates with what they did. Do like they did what they had to, but there is some sort of psychological guilt no matter what, right? If you're human and you're not a narcissist or a psychopath, you did something so severe and it has to take a toll. It's like why I think maybe there's an underlying theme of alcoholism within the parents in the film, in most of the films, if you think about it. And so there's no exception in the original. There's scenes where I believe they're in the kitchen, and Nancy and her mother are going back and forth, and she's just saying, you just need to go to sleep. And she's like, screw sleep, and like breaks her vodka bottle. And I remember, although I did not deal with terrorizing Freddy Krueger nightmares, I had issues with my mother too. And I remember that's something that you would do to gain, as a kid. I broke my mother's wine bottle before, out of rage, because it's just, that like, even if you don't admit it out loud, that bottle is the most important thing to that person, and they're not listening to you, so you're going to get rid of it. Maybe if it's not there, they'll listen to what you're saying. And I feel like that's conveyed in the movie without being said. Another scene is Marge, when Nancy's trying to sneak out, she's like pulling a hidden stash out of the towel closet and just laying there and drinking. And another theme in the films of A Nightmare on Elm Street is these teenagers are being picked off one by one, and they're dying in their sleep. Vicious, brutal deaths, and it's not a long period of time that their friends are dropping off, like dying from. It's like days, like every day there's a new friend dead. And the parents are like not listening to their kids when they're telling them, listen, I know what's going on. And they're like, no, you're just highly stressed, just need some sleep. Nobody wants to sleep. You're not listening. And then like they're still going to school. Nobody's trying to like really, in the first one, the mother had her issues, but she didn't know how to handle it. And I think that even with her issues, she still tried to help Nancy. She got her sleep study. She did tell her to stay home from school when Tina was murdered. But not all the parents but they're still so dismissive. I feel like Marge, she did explain to her about Freddy Krueger. So she did try, and I think that, unfortunately, because of her alcoholism, she wasn't taken very seriously either. And you have this dynamic of a household with Nancy and Marge that leave you wondering, the father wondering if his daughter is going crazy and if the mother is contributing to that, and he's dismissive when Glenn is murdered, and he's like, yeah, sure, they're just very dismissive. And like, these teenagers are all from broken homes. We're going to jump ahead a little bit to A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which is not as popular, but I watched it recently with, the boy Jesse. His father was very hard on him and dismissive, and literally I think a bird spontaneously combusted in the middle of like an attack or something, and they're like, this damn heat. No, no, that's not how that works, and it's so fucking strange. But another parent that we just talk about is like Kristen from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and 4. Her mother was, I don't know what she did, but she was very successful, beautiful home. But her thing to me, I don't want to say too much of an alcoholic. Her thing to me was that she was self-absorbed and thinking about a man. I think that was the thing with Kristen's mother. She said, look at the infamous line when we revisit the same scene in the beginning of 3. It's halfway towards the end of 3, where Kristen is in the opening scene and she's trying to paint the Freddy house and build the Freddy house. And her mom comes home from a date and she's like, oh, get to bed. What are you doing awake? It's past 1. And she's all done up. And there's that scene, she's trying to get in the bed and then you hear a guy that's like, where do you keep the bourbon? And she's like, I'll be right down. And she's like, I forgot a guest. And Kristen already knows. She's like, hey, you don't want to keep him reading. And the mom is just like blunt. She's like, that's right, I don't. Like her focus is finding a man. Like not so much her teenage daughter and whatever's going on. She's like, I'm here, but I'm not here. Like I really need you to like go away and go to sleep because I'm gonna go and I don't have time to deal with you. I have a man here, which is another theme with poor parenting. Like your daughter has been having these nightmares, and because she says it to her, like, Mom, I really don't, she said something like, I had a bad dream again. The mom's like, oh, so annoyed. God forbid, your kid needs you. She's not much different in 4 with her. She just tries to also, everything that happens to Kristen, she goes into the institution. She's, after the quote unquote suicide attempt, which was really Freddy that we find out. Her mother is, when Nancy's there in 3, she's just looking for attention, when her credit card, like she's very dismissive and wrong and rude, and these kids are all alone and that's all they have are each other. And thank God, but only 6 years later did they get Nancy in 3, and she's still like an undergrad. So she's still not a full respectable adult in the other adults' eyes. But we had Gordon, who eventually came around and ended up saving Kristen and Joey and Kincaid at the end of 3 because Nancy sacrificed herself. But even in 4, Kristen's mother, she forced her sleeping pills and was like, and that was the end of her daughter. Like nobody was listening. I don't even know how Kristen got out of the institution because she still seemed like she was never processed what happened in 3 and was still revisiting the rooms. But that's neither here nor there. But the next parent is Alice and her brother Rick. And their father, who, this one struck me a lot too because it made me the tiptoeing around and trying not to set him off kind of vibe. I'm sure not just myself, a lot of people can relate to in these films. And the scene, I cannot remember word for word what was said, but the scene where the dad comes home drunk and he has his bottle and the brother was boxing in the garage or whatever, and they come in the house and I think Alice takes like something out, like a salad that she had for dinner, and gives it to him. He's like I said, I don't remember the line, but it's something like, you call this a meal? You call this cold something a meal after a 10-hour day? What do I look like, a fucking rabbit? And does like a weird thing, and like I felt for her character and her brother, who's like, Dad, don't start, who's always like her protector. You could tell because she's so innocent and timid and a daydreamer, which I'm a huge daydreamer, and I was my whole life growing up because I came from this chaos where I would have to daydream like Alice would to get out of these real world horrors. And then you mix that with what's going on within the movies where there is a supernatural quote unquote boogeyman who's killing them in their dreams. Like there's no, like your daydreams are your escape. But now you have someone invading your dreams. So you have no real escape in the movies. And I could relate to Alice, like I said, that with that scene, she goes over, she smashes it, and she's like, whatever. She says something really, like stands up for herself, but we realize it's a dream, and he's also yelling at her, or to Alice, wake up. It's like long overdue, like just very verbally abusive. These kids are verbally abused. Even, I can't think too much in 5. Well, the Dan, her boy, baby's dad who died, his parents try to take her baby because it was his. I mean, all of the parents are just terrible parents and not thinking of any of the children or any of the people in the movies. And then we have the ultimate bad parent themselves, Freddy Krueger in Freddy's Dead. It turns out the whole movie of Freddy's Dead is about his daughter and his life. His father was verbally and physically abusive visibly in the movie, and he turned out to be this terrible child killer. And then, like, he's the worst parent of them all in all of it. He had a kid, and we turned out, and that was a very common theme. The only nightmare movie that portrays very good parenting is Wes Craven's New Nightmare with Heather Langenkamp and her son Dylan. She's everything that you would want a parent to be in all the other films. And I don't know if it was done deliberately, but Heather Langenkamp is the name of the actual actress, and she plays herself, and she also revisits the role of Nancy. We have Wes Craven, who, rest in peace, who was the creator of Nightmare on Elm Street, who created The New Nightmare and was in it as himself, Robert Englund. But she was there for her child. And unfortunately, her husband was, murdered, but she daydreamed a little bit. There was a lot of elements, but other than Wes Craven's New Nightmare, all of the parents on Elm Street were terrible. And it makes you look deeper into the movies. Say what you want about Freddy. He is a predator, right? And what do we learn about child predators? They pick and target and groom the children who come from broken homes like this. They're not the kids with beautiful, strong homes, right? They're the kids who are outcasts and whose parents are not together, but they're an alcoholic parent or an abusive parent or an absent parent, like Tina Gray's mother and stepfather. She was home alone because, they were going away on a trip. And she was left alone again. And end up, having her friends over because she didn't want to spend it all. She was 15 years old in that movie. They say it on the news, 15-year-old Tina Gray. So none of the parents here, any of them, had a focus on their actual child, including Nancy's mother and father. Like, as much as Marge Thompson tried to portray that she was there for Nancy, she was an alcoholic, and that still always is going to trump. The bottle is always going to trump until you get rid of it, and that's just what it was. And she became paranoid too, and like blaming her daughter, so she put bars on the windows and kept thinking something was wrong with Nancy and not believing Nancy. And the father just seemed like he left because he didn't want to deal with any of it, and that's also terrible on Nancy because she's stuck in this house. He should have taken her with him. That's why I revisit back to that. We don't know the dynamics, and this is a very deep, dark, like, dive into the world of Elm Street. But I think sometimes it's fun to, we've all had these. We've listened to episodes and we've listened to different things about Freddy Krueger and different. We can talk about the movies. We've all seen them, but like, let's dissect different parts of it. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity with the films and the platform of the podcast to talk about what the podcast was, which is The Heart Within Me, which can correlate to relating to things. And these parents, it's not uncommon. The only thing in the Nightmare on Elm Street films that is unrealistic is the concept of Freddy Krueger. If you removed Freddy Krueger, the themes in A Nightmare on Elm Street are real themes that can happen and do happen in real life with kids and their parents and predators. I mean, if Freddy wasn't a supernatural being and was just a child murderer like he is in there, I'm sure if we revisited his backstory, which I've said in the past episodes, I don't really believe in giving too much of a character away, like within the Halloweens and things like that. But I think in the case of Freddy Krueger, I think looking into his victims and how he chose them when he was alive would be also terrifying and interesting. And I can guarantee you those children that he took and kidnapped and killed came from broken homes. It is just it's an unfortunate fact. And look it up and look at the predators and look at predators and see how they target and groom. It's usually children that are susceptible and looking for an adult authoritative figure for guidance, and that's how they get them. So the movies do people say, oh, then this one sucked, or yes, some of them were a little more fanatical than the others, but they're still a lot of fun too. Freddy Krueger is the ultimate, one of the ultimate boogeymen, but really, I just, these poor children, watching them again as an adult, and these teenagers in the films and what they're dealing with is just terrible. Their friends are dying left and right, and nobody's listening to them, and their parents are horrible, and it's just a very, dissecting it on a much deeper level brings a whole new appreciation to the franchise, for me anyway. So I think that's why I really wanted to start with this series for the September school specials, because it ties in very much with the theme of an after school special that was on ABC. Because as I said in the beginning of the episode, they were really focused on difficult topics that kids and their parents can watch and discuss together. I think I watched an interview of one of the guys that helped create it, and he said that it came on at 4 o'clock because kids were out of school and their parent was home. One of the I think he said it's their mother, because back then that's mothers didn't work, they stayed home, and they watch it together, and it would bring up topics like divorce or bullying and try to get that conversation between the two happening. And that's kind of the same with what I'm going with in terms of A Nightmare on Elm Street and this horror, universe is this is an uncomfortable topic because I know for me, I was very embarrassed and it felt alone in situations where, because I came from a broken home with a lot of things going on, and my escape was horror movies. And I think I learned my tools from movies and series like A Nightmare on Elm Street, where you watch these teenagers and these strong heroes and heroines, or even the victims, deal with the bullies being the parents, and persevering and rising above and fighting back. Who knows? I might have even come up with, smashing my mother's wine because Nancy smashed her mother's vodka bottle. I don't really know. Subconsciously, probably, because I saw Nightmare on Elm Street at a young age. And these movies saved me and were my escape from my horror. Watching a horror similar but elevated, because you add in Freddy Krueger, and then it's like, oh, I have it bad, but at least when I go to sleep tonight, Freddy Krueger's not killing me or my friends in our sleep. But yes, this was a little bit of a different episode. I enjoyed it. I think it's fun to change up some of the ways of the episodes, because again, this podcast is The Horror Within Me, and it's not just movie and film reviews, which are a lot of fun, and they're going to continue to happen. I'm not going to stop the reviews and the rating systems and the trivia, but I think every now and again it's nice to have little specials and segments within months and do things like that. So I really enjoy this. I think you guys will like the after school movies that I've picked to dissect and discuss, and I really think you guys are going to be happy with the interview starting in October. And it's spooky season, so this is the time to, even like all year spooky season for me, but now I can really go even crazier in September and October. So really stay tuned. And again, that concludes this week's episode of The Horror Within Me. And if you want more content, as I mentioned before, you can find me on social media at Facebook and Instagram at The Horror Within Me. You can find me on TikTok at The Horror Within Me Podcast. And YouTube, stay tuned for the interview with a special celebrity guest that will be airing on October 2nd, to be precise, which is my 1-year wedding anniversary. So that's fun. And if you want to pre-order the shirt, make sure you follow on Facebook. So when we do the pre-order with the form and all of that with pricing, you will be able to see that. And I would greatly appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, all that fun stuff that I repeat and say every episode, because it really helps me out and helps the show out and gets in front of more people that will appreciate it and maybe want and learn something from it, or me, or just to have a good time and have fun. But again, that concludes this week's episode. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to sit and talk with me and dissect the world of horror. So stay safe, but more importantly, stay spooky.